Mario Bros. 3. Can I beat it without touching the ground? Here's the ground rules. The only times I'm allowed to touch it is at the start of the level, going through doors and pipes, and when spawning Bowser and Boom Boom. Otherwise, I need to avoid it at all costs. I am also allowed to walk on floating platforms since those aren't connected to the ground. Another thing I should mention is that for those who haven't beaten this challenge is assuming you've already beaten it with touching the ground. Because if you replay it after, you get a bunch of P-Wings in your inventory. 28 to be exact. So I will be restarting the game and using warp whistles to proceed on when needed. But without further ado, let's go! Starting things off with 1-1, it was actually kind of hilarious because these P-Wings are essentially things that allow me to skip the entire level. Now, I know it's not going to be like this for every level, but for these kinds where it's entirely outdoors, it makes it much easier for most of these. 1-2 was also pretty easy, although I did run into this Paragoomba toward the end, so thank God I have NSO backtracking. Because even hitting just one enemy or obstacle means I'm gonna have to restart the level. In 1-3, I decided to try and go for the warp whistle, which you do by crouching down on this white platform above until you fall underneath. Now, I thought it originally wouldn't be possible because I didn't know before that you can actually fly while crouching down. Thanks to this fun discovery, I was able to make my way to the right behind the goal and enter the hidden Toad House. After his dialogue, I can just barely open the box while staying afloat to get the whistle. Now, even though 1-4 is optional, I wanted to try it out anyway. And while I did cheese it with the P-Wing, I honestly wouldn't have had to use it until the very end since we have all these floating platforms. But whatever, I made it through. Now our first real challenge begins in one tower. Because we're no longer outdoors, we have some very narrow ceilings we need to squeeze in between with the ground below. As soon as I heard the jumping sound effect, that was my indication to rewind. While not impossible, it took me several attempts. After barely managing to do so, I wanted to try and go for the second warp whistle, which involves flying above the door entrance here and pressing up. I kept pressing it while flying above until I realized we actually need to be touching the ground in order to get in. Now, even though you could technically call this breaking my own rule set, I decided to just go ahead and do it since we would need the whistle anyway after running out of P-Wings. Next up is 1-5, and our next hurdle are these pipes, including the ones with piranha plants. Fortunately, I can swipe my tail to take them out, then afterwards barely fly under after many attempts. Now, 1-6 doesn't really have any solid ground until the very end. But I still avoided the platforms, mostly because I could cheese the levels, and it just looks more cool, let's be real. Before doing one airship, I did have to take on this Hammer Bro, which I had to waste a P-Wing for, but the fight itself wasn't that bad, and I can still touch the chest at the very end without touching the ground. The first airship went pretty smoothly thanks to the P-Wing, although I should mention that out of all the kings that have been transformed, this is the one I feel the least inclined to change back, as he just looks so adorable. Quit your whining, Toad. He just looks so adorable. But after taking out Larry, it's time for World 2's desert. Two 1 was completely harmless and uneventful, as well as 2-2. 2 Tower is where we run into the most annoying enemies by far, the Thwomps. Well, these ones at the beginning aren't too bad, especially because now you can fly over them once they land. But further in, we get to these ones where you're supposed to run really fast beneath all of them. But while in the air, the ceilings keep getting more and more narrow. And to make matters worse, we have this Boo chasing us. Leave me alone, you creep. This last narrow one at the end is by far the most challenging to duck under. After being this close to giving up, this happened. Oh man, that was just pure dumb luck. But moving forward, we moved to the next room, and avoiding these boos in the air above the spikes were a little annoying, but nothing compared to what we just went through. Boom Boom went boom boom, and next up is 2-3, which was a nice break after all this nonsense. These blocks here at the end technically doesn't count as ground, but for fun, I just floated above and hit the Koopa shell to destroy the blocks without me touching, which is actually just more safe in general and less risky for me to lose the P-Wing. 2 Sand Pit is where we meet the Angry Sun, who at the beginning looks pissed off, but doesn't start attacking us until we get about halfway to a quarter. We can't even take damage from him at first at the beginning, so that must have been intentional to save his wrath for the appropriate time. After completely forgetting to try 2-4, I went to 2-5, which honestly wasn't that interesting. 2 Pyramid, however, is really dumb. Right at the beginning before we enter, we have this weird platform right here, which we can't fly past when not on top. But when you get even just a little above, it won't let me proceed underneath to the door. I tried squeezing by many times, but just wasn't making any progress. Then about 10 minutes in, I had the idea to try crouching before jumping in the air at the beginning, which I could use to just barely make my way underneath and enter. Once inside, I made my way to the right and ran into these blocks, which I can swipe the middle one pretty easy. The top and bottom ones are a bit more problematic. So I went back to try and see if I can pick up a Buzzy Beetle while flying, but of course I can't. So I went back to the beginning and tried the crouching method again. With this, I could swipe the top block and squeeze through. But then I came into these stack of blocks with another different kind blocking this pipe. I swiped the top one and then glitched below to the bottom somehow. Not that it helps, but I just wanted to mention. I was then able to swipe the middle block, but I still couldn't squeeze through underneath. I went back to the left for some reason, and then went back here realizing I respawned a Buzzy Beetle, which I could hit to destroy the bottom block. One thing that sucked though was because I was in the crouch position, I couldn't go up this pipe. Fortunately, I could go back and stand on this block to get out of the crouching position, and then make my way back to go up to reach the goal. I used the hammer item to destroy this block and get the third warp whistle, then made my way back to do the airship, which honestly has nothing worth mentioning except that the parts that go above the screen I can still dodge, thankfully. "3-1 was our first water level, and as you can imagine, I mostly just played through these as normal since I'm swimming, although I did have to keep the P-Wing power-up without getting hit since I would need to use it to get to the end goal. 3-2 was another cheesy level with both the platforms and waters, as well as 3-3 since I don't need to worry about Boss Bass at all. In 3 Tower, no matter which door I went through, it didn't matter at all since I had the P-Wing and could just fly up to the area I needed to go to fight Boom Boom. In 3-4, I did need to avoid Lakitu and his Spinies at the end, but otherwise it was easy. 3-5 was completely underwater, and 3-6 was an auto-scroller with platforms, so pretty easy overall. 3-7 was also harmless, and in 3 Tower, it's underwater for most of it, and these boo lines do make up for trying to preserve my power-up, but this wasn't too bad either. 3-8 is another Boss Bass level where the stage dips in and out of the water, but it didn't matter at all since I had the P-Wing. 3-9 is infamous for being that one level in Mario Bros. 3 you can farm infinite 1-ups. What you do is drag this Koopa shell with you and bring it all the way to the right to hit these bullet bills. But since we can't touch the ground, it makes this impossible. However, this is NSO, so it hardly matters. The level itself really wasn't too bad though. Now, going forward, we are going to have to go through these warp pipes in the world map to access other parts of the world, meaning we have to use more P-Wings, but most of them weren't too bad as far as having to touch the ground. In 3 Airship, Wendy jumps surprisingly high, but she went down and onto Giant World. 4-1 and 4-2 were painless, and 4-3 had just one narrow ceiling underground and was also a breeze. Now, 4 Tower is the one that introduces those moving flames that bounce off the candles, which follow you when you face the opposite direction like boos. Unlike the boos, they don't float in the air, which is a huge relief. After flying underneath the first candle, the second one was a bit harder since I couldn't trap him below, but I squeezed around that one as well. I decided to go back and make my life easier by crouching down so I could go above and potentially make the next obstacles easier to manage. Unfortunately, this part here with the thwomp moving sideways and the narrow hole makes this part here tricky. Fortunately, we go down this middle pipe here as an alternative. Then we can just squeeze underneath this pipe here and make our way to Boom Boom. 4-4 gives us another underwater level, and this one Lakitus are throwing spinies at us, but fly above doing this the gamer way, and it's A-okay. I used this music box to put the Hammer Bros to sleep and preserve our power-ups before hitting 4-5 without trouble, as well as 4-6, 4 Second Tower, surprisingly, and 4 Airship. (5-1) also had no trouble, and 5-2 is that level known for letting us choose to go one of 2 paths, up or down. I chose up and did have another narrow pipe, but I eventually squeezed under. After that, 5-3 was also no trouble, but 5 First Tower had this one tricky obstacle where I had to avoid a thwomp, a boo, and a waffle. And I couldn't just fly up and hover in between because the waffle would hit me. So I basically just faced the boo so it wouldn't chase me, then waited for my chance for the waffle and thwomp to move at just the right times to make it through. Then I had to repeat the process with this thwomp before making it through to the end. 5 Second Tower was much easier, thankfully. Now that we're in the clouds, that means we have much easier levels, including 5-4, 5-5, 5-6, 5-7, 5 Third Tower, 5-8, 5-9, and 5 Airship. World 5 was by far our easiest one yet. (6-1) has walking piranha plants everywhere spitting spike balls at us, so we need to do our best to avoid those and fly up as high as possible. 6-2 and 6-3 mostly had floating platforms, so there was almost no trouble with these. 6 Tower is a level that's meant to have you stand on this platform for the majority, but because we can fly, there's no need for that. We're cheesing these levels. 6-4 had more floating platforms, but 6-5 and 6-6 are underground. Starting with 6-5, we are quite literally required to fly up here and destroy these 2 enemies, and then take the pipe on the other side currently being blocked. You're supposed to take the Koopa shell up here to destroy them, but since I can't pick that up, I tried taking one of those blue box, but they just break by the time I got up, which I could use to destroy this one on the outside. Then I tried flying while crouching to destroy these suckers, which I destroyed one but lost my power-up to the other. Trying again with both, I did somehow manage to destroy these top layers of blocks. Then I tried spinning my tail to destroy these two enemies again. After destroying the first one, it did look like I had touched the ground. But I didn't hear the jumping noise after, so I'm gonna give Mario the benefit of the doubt. After getting the second enemy, I flew up the pipe and finished. In 6-6, we have these Cheep Cheeps jumping out of the puddles, which are tricky to avoid. But at least they give us a star to use for that and the piranha plants. Then we have this underwater section, which really isn't that bad, even with all these annoying Cheep Cheeps. Although I only realized at the end of the level that I could have flied over everything at the beginning. Oh well. 6-7 had this interesting space here in the auto-scroller where I had to go all the way down to move forward, but it was pretty easy otherwise. 6-Second Tower had some tight squeezes to make, and I was surprised some of them were even possible without damage. Like here, I had to fly below instead of above. No interesting strats or anything, just a bunch of attempts. Now, despite being in World 6, 6-8 is not an ice level. I wonder if this was added here by accident or if they just forgot to add the ice aesthetic. Level itself, though, is alright, as well as 6-9, which gives us a precursor to Flappy Bird, and 6-10. In 6-Third Tower, you have to fly extremely low in the beginning to avoid these spikes, which might be feasible, but I'm going to combine an invisibility star to make my life a whole lot easier. But in this part where the room gets lower, you're supposed to touch the ground to activate, to my knowledge. However, I was somehow still able to activate it by hovering in the air above. Not sure how that happened, but I'll take it. For 6 Airship, I was able to fly under some portions and revive the Pringles Man. In 7-1, because we're supposed to mainly travel up vertically, I was able to complete this both with and without using the pipes. This felt really satisfying to blaze through. In 7-2, I accidentally went down that part that makes us hit music box platforms, so I tried the level again and flew above to cheese it, which I also did with 7-3. 7-4 was another underwater level, and outside of the usual hazards playing casually, this one wasn't too bad. 7-5 took place underground, and so there were a few narrow ceiling areas, but nothing outside of the usual song and dance at this point. 7 Plant 1 gave me no problems, nor did 7 Tower. 7-6 was another vertical level, which also didn't give me any issues. 7-7 gave me a chance to play Flappy Bird again, which was pretty cool. Until I came to this part where the pipe was too narrow to duck under, leading to our first level that is impossible. Fortunately, 7-8 is right below, so we'll just go there instead. After playing some more Flappy Bird, which I could play the entirety of here, I beat this level. In 7-9, while we do have all these pipes that are connected above the actual ground, some actually connect to the ground itself at the bottom, so I'm just going to avoid these as best I can. Trying to navigate through all of these is hard playing casually, so not touching the ground didn't make it any easier. While floating and going through the cracks, I had to line myself straight above or under so I'd stay between the lines. This took a lot of trial and error, but it was doable. 7 Second Tower is another impossible level, and that's because of this tiny gap we need to cross under here while avoiding the waffle. Fortunately, I have a cloud item in my inventory, so we'll use this to skip it. Now, what sucked about 7 Plant 2 is that even though I can put on a P-Wing before using a cloud item, I can't have that one when skipping the tower and entering this level. So that means it's time to use a Warp Whistle to take us to World 8. Tank is essentially the same as all the airships. And while it is a bit harder having round shots, bombs, and wrenches thrown at you, I got through and took out the Hammer Bro at the end. 8 battleship, more or less the same. I only had to play one of the hand trap stages, which gave me no trouble, even with the cheeps in the lava. Shouldn't they be like skeleton fish instead by now? Whatever, 8 airship is a fast-paced auto-scroller, but like all the others, I'm cheesing. 8-1 being able to fly with the P-Wing to skip the level is just hilariously satisfying, as this level is already hard on its own. 8-2 for some reason brings back the Angry Sun, even though it's dark outside, but if you stay in the center above the ground, he's not that bad here either. Now, 8 Tower is such a house of horrors and mazes to beware. While this doesn't do much, I did discover this pretty neat glitch where after you hit this block, a door portal opens. And you normally go to this part with the block, but if you stand on the other side of the door before pressing up, you'll clip through this wall and go to the other side. But as you can see, the gap is too narrow with spikes above, which basically means you're screwed. So with that said, it is not possible to not beat Super Mario Bros. 3 without touching the ground. Well, at least not yet. Let's back up a bit. Okay, so in World 7 we used a cloud item to skip 7-second tower, and it was only right after that that we used the warp whistle. So if we had simply used the warp whistle before, I would still have it now to use to skip 8 tower. So with that said, it is theoretically possible to beat Super Mario Bros. 3 without touching the ground. Can it be done? Let's find out. Now, 8 Second Tank has a lot of things thrown at you, quite literally. But if you play it carefully, it's more than possible. Now, on to the final challenge. 8 Castle starts us off having the statues misaim their beams. Take that, suckers! Now we just go below this narrow ceiling, and I do need to touch this platform here, but it goes down and isn't part of the ground itself. After navigating this squiggly section with the waffles, we make our way down to Bowser, whom, outside of spawning him in, we take him out without touching the ground, confirming that it is possible to beat Super Mario Bros. 3 without touching the ground. This is genuinely a miracle on wings. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more content. And as usual, stay safe, stay strong, stay silly. This is Animatic Gamer, signing off.